Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Now, let's rewind to August 28, 1963. The historic March on Washington, D.C. aimed at ending racial segregation. It was there that Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, envisioning a world where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That was 60 years ago. Fast forward to 2024, Moscow. A crowd of drunk Russians marches on mock Washington with rubber rockets and hatred in their eyes. Point our strategic nuclear missiles at U.S. cities, they chant. March on Washington right in the heart of Moscow. The whole scene looked like a bad joke, and the protesters don't get that they're the punchline. Good job, Russia. You've managed to turn a profound message of equality and hope into a ridiculous display of vitriol and absurdity.
За Белгород! Донбасс и Крокус! Берем США в фокус! Для победы России требуем ввести полетные задания в наши стратегические ядерные ракеты и нацелить их на города Соединенных Штатов Америки! Ярс, Сармат и Посейдон! Берем прицел мы! Вашингтон! На 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 Вашингтон! Яр! Сармат! И Посейдон! Берем прицел мы!
Now, talk about cringe. If you're somehow unfamiliar with the term, this is it in its purest, most nuclear form. Just imagine the mental gymnastic it took for the strategic thinkers in Russia to stage this parade of idiocy. It's so ridiculous, you almost have to assume that is a joke. My colleagues up in the newsroom even speculated that this could be a staged event. I mean, it's hard to believe this sort of complete and utter self-debasement could be done unironically. Congrats, Russia. We didn't think you could do it, but you've managed to out-cringe yourself. Dmitry Medvedev is in the news again. The former Russian president recently said that Russia should cause as much harm as possible to the countries that have imposed sanctions on Russia. Yep, you heard that right. Medvedev, in his infinite wisdom, believes that Russia should turn the lives of Americans and their allies into a perpetual nightmare. He said, quote, "Every day we should strive to inflict maximum harm on those countries that have imposed restrictions on our state and all our citizens. Harm them wherever possible, their economies, institutions, and rulers. Harm the well-being of their citizens, their confidence in the future." Sounds like quite the statesman, huh? Medvedev's brilliant plan includes targeting weak points to inflict damage, paralyzing companies and public institutions. He wants to destroy the energy industry, transport, banking, and social services of the United States and its allies to create a fear of the inevitable collapse of all capital critical infrastructure. It's like he's pitching a villainous plot in a bad action movie. Now, this level of melodrama and misguided hostility would be laughable if it weren't coming from a former world leader. So, cheers to Medvedev for reminding us all that when it comes to political tantrums, Russia still holds the gold medal. Now it's time for our latest segment of bizarre business strategies from Russian experts. Our star is Mikhail Alexandrov, who recently proposed a truly innovative approach. Drumroll, bombing Baku and completely obliterating the Azerbaijani oil industry. Huh?
Что придется что-то делать. В принципе, у России есть средства, даже не начиная войну, так сказать, контактную войну, имея в виду вот сухопутную войну с Азербайджаном, там нанести удары по Баку, разбомбить бакинскую нефтяную отрасль полностью, уничтожить бакинскую, эту азербайджанскую энергосистему ракетными ударами. Вот, кстати, и Запад от этого здорово пострадает. Если мы сейчас разбомбим их нефтяную отрасль, то нефть на Запад не будет течь. Это сразу же повысит цены на нефть здорово. В условиях, когда они потолок ввели. Я так чувствую, Азербайджан прикрывается, он же с нами подписал декларацию о стратегическом союзничестве, как там она называется. Он к этому апеллирует, что вот, а сам провоцирует наших миротворцев. Ну, ему надо дать понять, что мы, может, и не будем там воевать в Карабахе. Разбомбим всю энергосистему, нефтяную систему, и будет Азербайджан без нефти сидеть, без электричества. Как он там долго будет воевать, сможет воевать в таких условиях с Арменией, не знаю. Бакинскими провокаторами очень хорошо все просчитано. Да, миротворцы не могут применить оружие в такой ситуации. Они могут применить его только в случае прямого вооруженного нападения на них.
In a stroke of what can only be described as diabolical genius, Alexandrov suggests that Russia should attack Baku, bomb its oil industry into oblivion, and destroy the entire Azerbaijani energy system with missile strikes. Why? Well, in his words, the immediate spike in oil prices would deal a crushing blow to the West. Now, not only does this plan sound like it was cooked up in a villain's lair, but it's also a stark reminder that some experts seem to have skipped their econ and ethics classes. So here's a round of applause for Alexandrov for giving us yet another reason to be grateful that most business strategies don't involve launching missiles at other countries. Cheers to the audacity and absurdity. In Russia, paratrooper isn't just a military specialization, it's a state of mind. Case in point, a drunk Russian paratrooper fell out of the window of an apartment building, bounced off the canopy over the entrance, and landed on the ground only to stand up and walk away. It's the kind of story that makes you question the laws of physics and perhaps humanity itself. The resilience or sheer stubbornness displayed here is nothing short of astonishing. Gravity? Never heard of it. So let's give a round of applause to the Russian paratroopers for redefining what it means to be indestructible. When you can survive a fall like that, who needs a parachute? Last night was a tough one for residents of Russia's Rostov region. In the city of Taganrog and Mozorovsk, locals complained about air raid sirens and drones flying over their heads with no response from air defense systems. We know that explosions were heard near the Mozorovsk Airbase. That's home to Russia's 559th Bomber Regiment and its Su-34, Su-24, and Su-24M fighters. Russia uses these planes to carry out airstrikes on Ukrainian positions and civilian targets just over the border. Russian Telegram channels report that following the attack, the power went out in Morozovsk and a fire broke out, with plumes of smoke visible from all over the city. Now, Russia's Ministry of Offense reported this morning that air defense had shot down a total of 70 UAVs over the Rostov region. And no surprise here, local authorities also announced that they'd managed to stop the attack. Maybe someone should tell Russian Telegram users, because according to the footage they're posting online, it looks like the opposite is true. Then again, when have Russian authorities ever cared about the facts, or their citizens in that case? The former UN weapons inspector and convicted pedophile Scott Ritter attended a recent event at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., and is reported to have had a wonderful time. Just a reminder, Ritter was convicted in 2011 in the United States for pedophilia and 5 other charges and was released on parole after serving 2.5 years in prison. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he's embarked on a new and exciting career as a foreign expert for Kremlin propaganda outfits. You know, after all the atrocities committed by Russians in Ukraine, after all the horror stories we've heard from people who escaped the occupied territories, is it really a surprise that a convicted sex offender would be a welcome guest at one of Russia's most important embassies? Birds of a feather, am I right? And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.